Today, we're going to be learning about end-to-end testing using Cypress. Cypress is an open source front-end testing tool. So we have Cypress open here, and we have this test. So we're going to run it now. And as you can see, we can watch the test happen as it happens in real time, which is really useful for debugging. But we can also run Cypress as a headless browser, which means we could use it in CI tools such as Travis, and you wouldn't need an actual browser open. I wrote this really simple to-do application, which we're going to be using today to learn all about Cypress. And as you can see, in the Cypress tool, you can rerun your tests really quickly, which is super useful. So now that we know what we're going to do today, let's get started. So first of all, a few prerequisites. If you want to follow along with this tutorial, you could clone this repo which I made with this simple to-do application, and just gives us a really nice starting point for getting going with Cypress. Also, Cypress have super useful documentation. They also provide videos and everything to help you use Cypress and some really useful tips and tricks. The application which we're going to be using today is a really simple to-do application where you can insert to-do items and then mark them done, and then they carry over to this completed column. So the stack of this application is just a really simple Express server on the back end which handles gets, posts and patches of these to-do items, and it stores these items in just a JSON file. And for the front end, we just have one HTML file using some bootstrap markup and one JavaScript script which handles whenever buttons are clicked and when the window is loaded. So with all that, let's get started. The first thing we want to do is install our dependencies. So I'm going to stop my server here, and we need to install two dev dependencies. We need to install Cypress and start server and test, which is just a really useful module which can run our server and our tests at the same time, which we obviously need for end-to-end tests. So now that they're installed, we need to open Cypress for the first time. And this is going to create a Cypress directory for us here, where we can write our tests. So this command is just opening Cypress for the first time. So this opened this window, and as you can see, Cypress gives us some tests as examples, which are useful, and these tests can all run through, but they're nothing to do with our application. So what I like to do, first of all, is delete all these tests. They are useful for reference to look at if you need any guidance, but for now, we're just going to delete them. So we have this Cypress directory, and inside integration, we have this examples directory. So we're just going to delete this. And we're going to create our own test file called to-do. And the way we need to name these Cypress test files is .spec.js. So before we start writing our tests, there is one other thing that we need to do to get set up. So inside our package.json, we have some scripts. We have start dev, which just starts our server with nodemon, and we have a db reset script, which is going to be important in a few minutes. We're also going to add 4 more scripts. So we have test headless, which will run Cypress headlessly, so it won't open a browser. And this is what you'd use for your CI tools like Travis. We have test, which will open Cypress. It will open an actual browser and you can see the tests run. We have CI dev, which will start our server and will run the tests in the browser so we can see what's happening. And we have CI, which will do the same thing except headlessly. So if we save that, we're ready to get started. So the next thing we're going to do is we're going to use something called commands in Cypress. So inside the support directory, we're going to open index.js. And here we can write some commands which will run before all of our tests, before each of our tests, or after each of our tests, or at any time during the testing cycle. So to do that, we're going to add a before each. And inside this before each, we're going to execute something with Cypress. And this CY is something you're going to see a lot during this video. It's basically the global Cypress, which we can execute functions on. So here we're going to execute npm run db reset. And this is going to run the script which we have in package.json called db reset. It's going to reset our database. And this is what we want before every test, because we want each test not to depend on the test before it, and we want every test to start with clean data. So that's why we need that. So now we're ready to start writing our first test. So inside this to-do.spec, Cypress uses Mocha globally, so we're able to use describe, which if you've ever used Mocha for testing, you'll know about. So we're going to give a description. We're just going to describe as to-do app. And now inside here, we're going to start writing our tests. So we're going to have a before each again, and before each test, we basically just want to go to a page. So we want to go to cy.visit and just the root. Which reminds me, we need to do something. So we need to tell Cypress where our application is running. And Cypress gives us this cypress.json file where we basically put configurations. So here we can put where our app is running, and it uses the key base URL, and ours is running on localhost 5000, as you can see from the server file. So inside cypress.json, we've basically told Cypress where our application is going to be running. And that means inside our tests, when we say cy.visit here, it's visiting localhost 5000. So now let's write our first test. So we're going to say it. Again, this is Mocha syntax. So we're going to say, okay, there are no to-dos. So basically, when we visit this page first, there shouldn't be any to-dos. So if we look at our HTML file now, we should be able to see where the to-dos are stored. So we have this table, and the table body has an ID of to-do.body, and this is where the to-dos which aren't done yet are kept inside this table. And we also have this other table with an ID of done.body, or done.body. So we're going to be using both of these and checking on our initial page load, is there any to-do items here? So inside this it, we're just going to store this as a comment so we remember. And there's also to-do done. So we need to check these elements. We need to check if they have any children. So when the page is loaded first, they shouldn't have any children. So we're going to do cy.get. And we're using a CSS selector, so it has an ID of to-do body. And we want to check the children. So it should have length of 0. And to-do.done should also have a length of 0. So we can delete these now. And we're ready to run this test to see if it actually works. So we have a command which will run all of these in the browser, and it is ci-dev. So if we do npm run ci-dev, we should be able to see these tests happening. So this window has opened up, and now we can see the list of our integration tests. So we just have this one test, which we're going to run. And this will open up a browser, and now we can see our tests happening in real time. So as you can see, we can see the whole life cycle of the test. We can see npm run db reset occurred. We can see we visited this page, we're getting the to-do body, and there seems to be something wrong here. So we need to look into that, but it failed and we're given this message. Timed out retrying, expected to find element to do done, but never found it. And this is because we named it incorrectly, I think. So if we go back to index.html, the table body is actually called done body. So even if with all of our copy and pasting, we made a mistake there. So now we've saved that, and this is really cool because Cypress will run our tests again automatically. As we're using NodeMon, any changes I make here will run straight away. So if we change this to 1, we can see that it's running again. It's checking to see if it has a length of 1, but it doesn't. It got 0, so it failed. So let's change that back to 0. And our test should pass again. Yeah, so all of our tests are passing. Another super useful feature of using Cypress not headless is that we can run through all of these and basically see the state. So here there's nothing happening, but basically as we go through these, we would be able to see the browser change. And we're going to see that in a minute. So next, we're going to create a to-do. So we're just going to copy this, and we're going to call it, okay, create a to-do. And here, we're not going to get them to begin with this time, but we might need them after. So we will keep it like that. So after we create one, the to-do body should have a length of 1, and the done body should still have a length of 0, as we won't have marked it done yet. So now we need to create a to-do. So we're going to say cy.get, and we have an input inside our HTML file, and this input has cy data. So I've given this input an attribute of cy data because I know this shouldn't change. This attribute is only used for my Cypress tests. If I was just to use the ID, this could change over time and this would break your tests. So that's why we're using this attribute, and we'll be able to select this input based on this attribute. So heading back into our test, we can do cy.get input with an attribute of cy data equals to new to do, and we want to type, and we want to type some text. So we're going to type take out the bins. So once we've saved that, we should now be able to see this happening. So our first test passed, and now we can see we've typed in take out the bins, but we haven't actually created it yet, so we need to hit this create button. So to do that, we're going to use cy.get, and we need to select the button. So again, the button, I didn't actually give it a cy data, but let's give it one now. So we're just going to say create to do. Now we need to select this, so it's a button with cy data equals create to do, and we want to click it. So because this is a button, or I guess you can click any element, we can use this click function. So if we save, we should now be able to see our test running, and this time it didn't create it, something wrong. Oh yeah, so I just have a typo here. This should be data, and hopefully this will work. Yeah, cool. So as I explained before, we can now run through the whole life cycle of the test and see what happened. So here you can see we visited here, we typed in take out the bins, and then we clicked this button, and after we clicked the button, the to-do item was created, and then we're checking the length of the table body, and it's 1, and the completed to-do items is still 0, which is what we want. So this is some functionality which we might be using over and over again in our tests. So we might want to, instead of copy and paste this, abstract this, and normally what we do is create a function to do this. But with Cypress, we have something called commands, which we're going to do now. So if I copy this and head into this support commands folder, you can see we have some useful help here, but I'm just going to say cypress.add.commands.add, and we need to give it a name. We're just going to call it create to do, and we're going to give it a parameter of text, and inside here then we're going to put our functionality. So if we save that, we can now use this Cypress command inside our tests. So instead of having both of these lines, we can say cy.createToDo, and we give it a parameter of text. So we need to pass in some text here, which will be the to-do text. I need to wash the dishes. So now this will use this Cypress command to create the to-do item, and again we're verifying the length. So let's head over and see if it worked. It didn't seem to rerun. If I restart the tests, take out the bins, So instead of hard coding take out the bins here, I need to change it to text. And then inside the test, we have passed in the text, I need to wash the dishes. So now we can see inside the test, it's creating a to-do with the text, I need to wash the dishes. So we've come to a really good stage here now. We have created a to-do item and we can verify that it was created. So the next thing we want to do is mark it as done. So we want to do something like this inside our test and then check the length of both of these tables again. So we're going to create another test, and this one's going to be called create a to-do and mark it done. So again, we want to create the to-do, but then we want to mark it done. So as you can see inside our script.js, every time that we are loading the page, we are organizing these to-do items into either they need to be done or they're already completed. And for the ones which need to be done, we are rendering a button, and we're giving it this CY data with to-do-index. So the first to-do item is always going to have a CY data attribute of to-do-0. So we can utilize that, and we can say cy.get. It's going to be a button, and this button is going to have an attribute of CY data, which is going to equal to-do 0. So what do we want to do with this button? Now that we've selected it, we want to click it. So again, we're going to call the click function, and we're going to save. So it's running through our tests, and we're starting to build up a bit of a suite of tests now, which is nice. And there seems to be something wrong with this. So I'm just going to restart my tests. And we can see that the last one should fail because we didn't change the body. So here we're checking for if there's any to-do items here, which there isn't because we've marked it done. So we need to change this to 0. And we also need to change this to 1 because this to-do item has been marked done. So if I save that, our tests will run again, and they seem to be successful. And yeah, we can see now, again, we can follow through the whole life cycle of the test, and we can see that once we click the button, it changed over to completed, which is what we want. So we're just going to write one more test, and this is going to show the power of this command. So here, this test, we're going to create 5 to-dos, and we're going to mark 2 done. So the 5 to-dos we're going to create means we just have to copy and paste this 5 times. I need to wash the car, walk the dog, do some work. So these are all the things I need to do today. And we're going to mark the first one done, and we're going to mark the third one done. So once this is finished, we're just going to leave these as now as 0 and 1 because we want to make sure our test is failing first before we make it pass. So as you can see, it's walking through, making all 5 of our to-do items, and it marked 2 of them done. And now it's going to fail because it's expecting these numbers to be different. So what should they be? We can see at the end we have 3 to-do items left, and we have 2 completed. So we're going to change the to-do body to 3 and the to-do completed to 2. And this is going to rerun our test. And it all works. So that's super good. That's our tutorial finished. I wanted to emphasize in this tutorial how easy it is to create end-to-end tests using Cypress. And I think that came across quite well. This is actually so useful for TDD, so you can write your tests before you actually write your code for the browser, which is something that was more difficult using something like Selenium. One of the main differences between Selenium and Cypress is that Selenium runs outside the browser and executes remote commands across the network, but Cypress does the exact opposite. Cypress is executed in the same run loop as your application, which makes things like resetting the database super useful. As you can see here in the support index.js, we're running this npm command inside our end-to-end tests, which is exactly what we want to do. Before, this was a real challenge, so Cypress gives you that functionality. I didn't show it here, but Cypress is also really good at mocking data, as it can intercept things in the network on the fly and change them. And all of this is described in the Cypress documentation, so I definitely take a look at that. I hope this video helped you out. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.